Some moments feel small at first, a smile, a question, a casual comment in a conversation. And yet, when the timing is perfect and the stakes are high, those moments explode. This was one of them. The studio was immaculate. Every light carefully positioned to flatter, every camera angle rehearsed to perfection. The kind of stage where history is whispered before it's shouted. At one end, Donald Trump, a former president, billionaire, television personality, a man whose public image had been shaped, polished, and performed for decades. A figure who relied on spectacle, volume, and charisma to control the narrative. Tonight, he sat under the weight of bright lights, his posture a mixture of confidence and calculation, every word ready to be broadcast to millions. Across from him, Barack Obama, former president and master of measured poise, radiated calm authority. His presence wasn't loud, but it carried a weight no theatrics could match. Every gesture was precise, every pause deliberate. He wasn't here to shout, he was here to reveal. The moderator, experienced and cautious, opened the evening with atypical pleasantries, questions about family, resilience, and leadership. For a moment, it looked ordinary, polished, safe. Trump leaned forward, his smile broad and rehearsed. "Family is the backbone of leadership," he said, voice firm. "I have the best. Melania has been incredible. A true partner. That's what gives stability to lead." Every word was meant to assure the audience, to sell the image of a man whose life outside the Oval Office was flawless, controlled, impeccable. Obama listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. He allowed Trump to present his performance, to exhaust himself on the familiar stage he knew best. And then, with a calm gravity that had defined his presidency, Obama spoke. "A president should be careful about using marriage as a credential." He said his voice was soft, yet it cut like glass. Not gossip, not rumors, but principle. Because when you present your private life as a public measure of character, you invite scrutiny, and that scrutiny is not optional. The words hung in the air like smoke. The audience shifted, sensing tension beneath the polished dialogue. Trump's smile faltered just slightly, enough to register on camera. Confusion flickered in his eyes. Irritation followed. He hadn't expected this line of questioning. "Excuse me," Trump interjected, leaning forward aggressively. "What are you doing? Don't talk about my wife." Obama didn't rise to the bait. He didn't shout. He merely leaned back slightly, hands folded, eyes steady. "I'm talking about accountability," he said, "and about the cost of image when it becomes the product of public trust." The studio seemed to hold its breath. Cameras panned across the live audience. Reporters leaned forward. Every viewer at home felt it. The shift from civility to confrontation, from performance to exposure, Obama continued, describing patterns of public representation that seemed ordinary to insiders but carried a larger ethical question when funding and public trust were involved. Separate schedules, controlled appearances, intricate logistical choices, all legal, all routine. But when framed as the centerpiece of a public claim to character, suddenly they became a story the audience was entitled to examine. Trump's face began to wring. The composure he relied on so heavily started to crack. "Lies," he barked. "Disgusting lies. You have no right. You're jealous. My marriage is perfect. Perfect." He wasn't sitting anymore. He stood pacing, pointing, gesturing at cameras, demanding attention. Every step, every word was designed to overwhelm. But for the first time that evening, control was slipping. Obama remained still, measured, almost mournful, hands folded, expression calm, but sharp. No yelling, no spectacle, only the quiet, unstoppable logic of accountability. For a beat, Trump had nothing to counter. No prepared nickname, no quip, no deflection. The audience heard it, the sound of a narrative collapsing under its own weight. And then, in a moment that would be replayed endlessly across news cycles, social media, and late-night commentary, Trump's frustration peaked. Microphone in hand, he snapped. "This is a disgrace." He hurled it to the floor. The clatter echoed across the studio. A punctuation mark for a performance that could no longer hold. Silence fell. Cameras lingered. The audience, both live and virtual, realized they were witnessing not just a breakdown, but a revelation. A carefully constructed image once bulletproof now lay exposed, and the question everyone was thinking but too afraid to voice hovered in the air. If the performance is everything, what remains when the stage goes dark? The room was thick with anticipation. Every camera angle, every microphone, every light beam seemed to wait for what would come next. It was the kind of tension that made viewers at home lean forward, fingers gripping armrests, ears straining to catch even a whisper. The energy wasn't manufactured, it was real. The spectacle of control clashing with exposure. Trump, still pacing, was a figure of desperation disguised as authority. Every hand gesture exaggerated, every glance toward the camera demanding loyalty. His voice oscillated between anger and disbelief. A man unaccustomed to a stage where his usual tactics failed. "I've done more for this country than anyone else," he snapped, voice cracking slightly under pressure. "More than any president, more than anyone." His words, meant to dominate, landed hollow. The calm logic of the previous speaker had already undermined him. Every self-praise now sounded defensive, a mask slipping too far to hide the anxiety beneath. Obama, sitting with a quiet dignity that had defined his presidency, didn't respond immediately. His eyes, steady and observant, captured everything. The audience, the cameras, the former president unraveling. His pause was intentional, a mirror reflecting both truth and absurdity. Silence in moments like these can speak louder than any tirade. The moderator, sensing the danger escalating beyond civility, tried to intervene. "Mr. Trump, let's return to policy," she began, her voice firm but cautious. But Trump ignored her. He had become a force of reaction, a storm that refused direction. His insistence on proving perfection in private life, on defending a carefully curated image, now revealed the cracks. Every claim about marriage, loyalty, and family stability became a spotlight highlighting inconsistencies. And then it happened. A reporter, steady, unflinching, posed the question that would make history. "Mr. Trump, why wait for Congress to release the Epstein files? Why not just do it now?" The words hung in the air, simple, direct, devastating. The kind of question that isn't combative, it's unavoidable. It didn't yell, it didn't provoke, it demanded clarity. Trump froze for a fraction of a second, a noticeable pause. Then he stumbled over his response. "I think you are a terrible reporter, a terrible person, and a terrible reporter. The Epstein thing, Democrat hoax, your company, perpetrators." The room stiffened, the audience at home, the staff, the cameras, all caught in the unraveling. There was no humor, no spectacle that could distract. Every attempt to defend, to insult, to deflect only magnified the fragility of the narrative he had spent decades cultivating. He doubled down, the words tumbling faster, more chaotic. "I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something. License should be taken away from ABC." His hands waved, microphone trembling. Each gesture, each shouted phrase underscored panic rather than power. Even the audience's reaction shifted. The laughter that might have accompanied previous performances vanished. Murmurs replaced applause. Uneasy whispers spread like wildfire through the studio. The performance had ended. Reality had entered the room. Jimmy Kimmel, seated with an expression of deliberate calm, didn't need theatrics. He didn't mock. He didn't interrupt. He simply replayed the contradictions, stacking clips side by side, letting the words hang like evidence in a courtroom. Vance's praises for Trump played alongside Trump's own statements, now impossibly inconsistent. The silence after each clip was devastating, not empty, deliberate, a reminder that truth doesn't need shouting to land. The audience felt it. The cameras captured it, and Trump, he was trapped in a space where charm, bravado, and sheer volume could no longer dictate perception. Offstage, social media exploded. Clips circulated immediately, each share amplifying the unraveling in real time. But the real impact came from the quiet analytical viewing. People rewatching, rewinding, realizing the contradictions didn't require opinion. They required observation. Trump's frustration grew. His tweets followed. Fury, accusation, diversion, but never answers. Every attack against Kimmel, Vance, or ABC only reinforced what millions of viewers had already seen. The silence of accountability was louder than any noise he could manufacture. Meanwhile, at home, viewers leaned forward. They weren't laughing. They weren't cheering. They were witnessing exposure. Every pause, every unanswered question, every failed deflection became a lesson in the limits of spectacle. The former president had relied on performance for so long that the moment reality pressed, he had no tool to manage it. Kimmel closed the segment quietly, a masterclass in restraint. You don't need to yell. You don't need to insult. You just need to let contradictions speak for themselves. And speak they did. Across the nation, conversations shifted. The story wasn't about comedy. It wasn't about insult. It was about clarity, about a man's inability to defend a narrative under even the gentlest, most methodical scrutiny. And the echo lingered long after the lights dimmed. A reminder that confidence alone, no matter how loudly proclaimed, collapses under calm, deliberate exposure. The cameras captured every detail, yet somehow it felt as if the room itself was holding its breath. The air was thick with anticipation, almost oppressive, charged with a tension that seemed to vibrate through the studio walls. This was no longer about spectacle, about ratings, or even politics. It was about control, credibility, and the terrifying fragility of a public persona built on performance. Trump, still standing, face flushed, hands trembling slightly despite his effort to appear commanding, seemed unaware that the audience at home, millions of eyes, were now witnessing a slow-motion unraveling of a carefully constructed image. Every line he delivered was a defensive lunge, a grasp at an illusion that was slipping through his fingers. I have a great marriage. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. His voice rang loud, but there was a quiver, a note of panic. The words meant to assert strength now echoed fragility. The cameras caught every micro-expression, the tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible flicker of doubt in his eyes. The moderator, sensing the escalation beyond performative defense, attempted once more to steer the conversation towards safer waters. Mr. Trump, perhaps we should focus on policy achievements. But the words barely landed. Trump waved them away, pacing like a caged animal, repeating his mantra of perfection, his insistence on loyalty, his relentless need to assert superiority and personal life as if that alone legitimized leadership. The problem wasn't just the content of his statements, it was the performance itself. The fragility was visible in every gesture, every strained grin, every defensive retort. Then came the moment that would define the segment. A young reporter, poised and fearless, leaned forward and asked a simple yet devastating question. Mr. Trump, why not just release the Epstein files now? Why wait for Congress? The room froze. The simplicity of the question belied its power. There was no insult, no mockery, only truth presented in a way that could not be ignored. For the first time in the segment, the illusion of control wavered visibly. Trump's eyes flickered, his composure cracking, hands clenching the edge of the desk as if it could anchor him to authority. You're a terrible reporter, a terrible person. His words tumbled out, rapid, disjointed, defensive. It's a Democrat hoax. Your company perpetrators. The room absorbed the chaos in stunned silence. Laughter, applause, all gone. Only tension, only exposure, only the uncomfortable awareness that someone's carefully curated image was collapsing in real time under the weight of calm scrutiny. Jimmy Kimmel, sitting in deliberate stillness, allowed the contradiction to unfold. Clip after clip, statement against statement, the narrative became impossible to defend. Kimmel didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to attack. The silence, punctuated by carefully stacked evidence, became a weapon far sharper than any insult. Vance, attempting to interject, faltered under the scrutiny, his usual rehearsed talking points crumbling as viewers at home realized that charm, volume, and repetition could not substitute for consistency or truth. Each clip replayed on social media, each moment dissected by analysts and commentators, reinforced a growing, undeniable reality. The former president's public persona could no longer withstand calm, deliberate observation. Trump's reaction became increasingly erratic, his gestures larger, his voice higher, his anger spilling over into desperation. Licenses should be revoked. ABC terrible. You're all terrible. Each outburst underscored the loss of control, the deepening vulnerability that the segment had exposed. Meanwhile, the audience at home and in the studio felt it. You could almost see the shift. A collective leaning forward, a silent acknowledgement that what was unfolding wasn't theater. It was real. And for once, the power dynamic was clear. The scrutiny had moved from hypothetical debates to actual accountability, and it landed squarely on the former president. The social media explosion was immediate. Clips went viral, dissected in real time by millions. Viewers didn't just comment on Trump's outburst. They discussed the method, the calm dismantling of pretense, the power of patience and observation. Every silence, every pause, every carefully placed clip became a lesson in the limits of spectacle. By now, Trump's narrative was unraveling entirely. His carefully curated image of invincibility and control was gone, replaced by chaos that he couldn't command. The contrast between performance and reality was stark. Where once his words would dominate, now they only revealed the fragility beneath the surface. Kimmel's calm closure of the segment left viewers with a simple truth. You don't need to yell. You don't need to insult. You only need to let the evidence speak for itself. And when it does, the truth is undeniable. As the studio lights dimmed and the camera slowly pulled back, the audience could feel the weight of what had occurred. Not a punchline, not an attack, but a moment of exposure so precise it would echo across conversations for weeks, months, even years. The story wasn't about comedy. It was about clarity, about accountability, about the collapse of a persona built on performance when faced with deliberate scrutiny. And in that silence, viewers realized the final unshakable truth. Confidence, no matter how loudly proclaimed, collapses under calm, precise observation. And that collapse is far more compelling, far more unforgettable than any outburst ever could be. The studio lights dimmed slightly, casting elongated shadows across the polished floor, as if the room itself understood the gravity of what had just unfolded. Cameras lingered on Trump, now seated, but no longer commanding the room. His earlier aggression had faded, leaving a hollow shell of authority. Every attempt to reclaim dominance now sounded hollow, a faint echo of a man who had once thrived on spectacle but now struggled under the weight of reality. For viewers at home, the tension was almost unbearable. Social media exploded with real-time reactions, tweets dissecting micro-expressions, viral clips highlighting pauses, silences, and the moments that didn't make the headline. Experts debated the psychology of performance under pressure. Political commentators replayed the sequence endlessly, noting how a calm question, delivered without insult, had undone a carefully curated public persona. Trump leaned back, hands gripping the armrest, eyes darting to the cameras as if searching for allies in the unseen audience. His usual confidence was replaced by hesitation, his voice cracking as he tried to inject humor, charm, anything to regain the narrative. But each attempt fell flat. Laughter tracks and applause cues could not cover the gap between performance and perception. I have the best marriage. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. His words meant to assert authority, now exposed vulnerability. The repetition, once a tool of dominance, now became a trap. Proof of defensiveness. Proof of a narrative teetering on collapse. The audience could see it. The cameras captured it. Millions at home witnessed it. Kimmel, seated calmly, allowed the silence to stretch. Clip after clip of contradictory statements from Trump and his allies was displayed on screen. No commentary, no insult, no attack, only evidence. Each moment made it increasingly impossible to deny the contradictions, the inconsistencies, the carefully crafted but now fragile facade. Off camera, social media exploded. Memes, analysis, and viral threads spread like wildfire. The narrative Trump had spent years cultivating, a persona of infallibility, control, and charm, was being dismantled publicly, methodically, and with a precision that no volume, repetition, or insult could counteract. Trump's body language betrayed his inner turmoil. He tapped fingers nervously, shifted in his seat, attempted forced smiles, and leaned toward the cameras as if proximity could reassert control. But it was too late. Every gesture, every strained grin, every defensive retort reinforced the impression of a man unprepared for accountability. Meanwhile, Kimmel continued to speak calmly, each word deliberate. The truth doesn't need shouting. Lies collapse when compared to reality. Repetition cannot replace consistency. Confidence without substance is fragile. His tone was steady, almost soothing, yet cutting like a scalpel. The segment became a masterclass in exposure. Show the claim, show the contradiction, allow silence to speak. For viewers, the lesson was clear. The spectacle of performance, the shouting, the bluster, the endless repetition, could never withstand scrutiny when confronted with calm precision. The former president's narrative was unraveling before their eyes, not with ridicule, but with clarity. Trump attempted one last stand, raising his voice, gesturing wildly, insisting that everything was perfect, that he had done nothing wrong, that accusations were unfair. But the audience, both in the studio and at home, had already decided. They were witnessing an unraveling, and no amount of noise could conceal it. The moderator attempted to redirect, to inject civility, but even her voice seemed faint under the weight of the moment. The room had shifted. Attention, power, and judgment had moved away from the performer and toward the observer. Every eye, every thought, every discussion now revolved around accountability, truth, and perception. As the segment neared its conclusion, Kimmel leaned forward slightly, voice calm but resonant. When performance meets precision, the performance fails. Silence can expose more than insult. Evidence outlasts outrage. And when the truth stands, the facade falls. Trump, realizing the room no longer followed him, finally slumped back, face pale, eyes searching for a lifeline that didn't exist. The final moments of the broadcast were surreal. A man accustomed to commanding attention reduced to reactive flailing. A persona built on spectacle exposed under the unyielding light of calm scrutiny. The broadcast ended, cameras pulling back to show the studio as a whole. The audience, still processing, remained silent for a beat, then erupted into murmurs and applause, not for triumph, not for victory, but for clarity. The collective realization that what had been witnessed was not entertainment, but exposure resonated across millions of screens simultaneously. Within hours, social media, news networks, and commentaries dissected every moment. Analysts praised the technique, the patience, and the calm execution that had rendered bluster powerless. Clips of Trump's defensive outbursts went viral, each replay reinforcing the power of measured confrontation over performance, of calm scrutiny over spectacle. By the end of the day, the narrative was undeniable. Confidence and spectacle can manipulate perception temporarily, but truth, precision, and calm evidence ultimately prevail. The former president's persona, once a towering performance of control and charm, lay exposed. His attempt to dominate through volume, repetition, and deflection had failed, and the lesson lingered for viewers everywhere. No performance is invincible. No spectacle can withstand scrutiny. Silence, observation, and evidence are infinitely more powerful than any blustered claim. As the studio emptied and the cameras powered down, the moment remained. A quiet but undeniable reckoning witnessed by millions. History, public memory, and social perception had already recorded the collapse. And in that collapse, clarity reigned supreme. Not loud, not sensational, but precise.